In our reading today, we continue to read through the book of Jeremiah. And I would divide up our devotion into two parts. Part one, the devotion for today, the word that I would place over it would be the word discipline. Because clearly at the heart of our reading today is God's discipline of the people of Judah. They had forsaken their covenant with God. They had disobeyed his laws. They had crafted for themselves golden idols that they were bowing down and worshiping, which was obviously a clear violation of the Ten Commandments. And because God loves his people, he disciplined them. And what we read in today's reading is Jeremiah the prophet warning the people that God's judgment was coming. And that judgment would come in the form of exile. Around 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire would come into Jerusalem, would destroy the walls, destroy the temple, and would carry off into exile thousands upon thousands of Jews, forcing them to live in exile for a period of about 70 years. But the purpose of that exile, the purpose of that discipline, was not mere hatred or anger or wrath. God's wrath was issued forth with an attempt to renew the people, to restore them, to bring them back to God. And oftentimes when we find ourselves in the midst of discipline, it's hard to understand the purpose of it. But the reality is if that discipline is done with love, it's intended to bring about restoration. It's like a loving parent who warns their child, don't touch the hot stove, don't leave the yard, eat your green beans. We don't do it out of spite. We give those warnings out of love. And when our child disobeys those warnings and acts in disobedience, we correct them, we discipline them so that future actions might be affected, so that they might experience the blessing of obedience. And so maybe right now in your life, you're experiencing the consequences of sin. Maybe that's something that you're struggling with right now. And whenever we find ourselves in the midst of those consequences, it's so easy to blame God and to get angry with God. But if we're suffering through those consequences, I think the proper response is, Lord, what are you teaching me? How can you change me? How can you transform me? How can you renew me? If you just ask, He'll follow through. He'll obey. He'll listen to you. I love what the writer of Hebrews says when he talks about this idea of discipline. He says, for the moment, all discipline, it may seem painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Will you let yourself be trained by discipline if that's what you're experiencing right now? I pray that you will, because on the other side of that discipline will be the loving arms of God, renewing you, restoring you, and helping you to experience true forgiveness.